Jim. He's dead.
Hello and welcome to Improv Autopsy. I'm your host, Stephen Cadwell. This is part 2 of my interview with improv performer, teacher, and frequent foil of Eli Castro, Jose Rodriguez. In this episode, we talk about the value of post-show discussion and notes, the scene in Orlando, and Jose will answer my Proustian questionnaire. Please enjoy part 2 of Jose Rodriguez, Improv Autopsy. Do you find post helpful?
I do. So when I teach it in class and I tell the students, I feel post is going to be the most important thing. With that being said, post is a double-edged sword because in improv, it is the only line of work, let's call it, where your colleague is going to tell you something that you did was either wrong or right, when normally it's somebody in a position of power above you.
Yeah.
So you have to have thick skin to accept that. So what I usually teach when I'm telling them about how I'm going to give them notes and I tell them that post is important, I'm like, just think of it this way. Whenever somebody gives you a note, all I want you to say is thank you, because it's a gift. They've given you a gift. They're offering you something. So just say thank you. And the reason for that is, in the moment, you're going to want to defend yourself. Because all notes to me are productive. But if it's in the negative field where it's like you did something wrong, they feel, you're going to try to defend yourself. It's human nature. But if you just say thank you, and then later on your way home, you start processing and you're like, oh, you know what? That note makes kind of sense. I should have done this and this. Then it's more productive for you. Because no matter how bad a note given to you is, it's going to help you in some way. I've been given some notes where, I've called you before back when I was apprenticing at SAK when I was like, I'm done. I'm like, these notes just make no sense. It was like, what do you mean that? I remember one of them was after the show and, when people are exiting and we would line up, remember, down the stairs and people would say, oh, great job. And that to me always is a little awkward just because it just feels weird. But in this particular instance, they're walking out. And the person that's giving me this note is to my left. And as they're walking out, they keep telling me, great show. We think you're really funny. We love you. And I had like a couple of those. And they didn't acknowledge that person at all. That's what makes me feel awkward all the time.
Yeah.
So then on our way to the green room, this person's like, well, in all shows, kind of like in sports, there are your Shaquille O'Neals and there are your star players. And then there are your bench players, and you're more of a bench player. I was like, what? Like, I remember I called you and Greg. I was like, I just got this note. And you were like, just don't worry about that. Just because it really like upset me.
Yeah.
And that was, in my beginning years of improv. Now, so many years down in improv and getting so many notes and listening to notes and giving notes, it's like they're all beneficial in some way. You just have to be willing to have thick skin. And like I said, just say a thank you, accept it. Because here's why I tell people, if you don't accept it, if I don't tell you thank you, you give me a note, Stephen, and I don't tell you thank you, instead I defend myself. I'm like, well, Stephen, this was what I was doing. I don't believe that. What's going to happen is you are then going to stop giving me notes. Because you're going to feel like, why am I going to give Jose a note? Because he's always combative about it. He's always defending it. And what that's going to impede is one day you're going to give me a note that I needed and I just stopped you from giving it to me.
Yeah.
So that's why I say, just say thank you. Process it later and get rid of our egos, because ego is usually what kills notes.
Yeah.
Receiving notes.
I also think that in terms of what you're learning from notes, sometimes you learn more about the other person than yourself in the note.
Correct. And that's one thing I loved about Offsides is we weren't afraid to give each other notes and we weren't afraid to help each other succeed, because that's where our notes came from.
Yeah.
We wanted each other to succeed. In our journey through SAK, you got into the ensemble first, but you had no ego. On the contrary, you were like working on how can I get my friends up here too. So you pushed us, you gave us good notes, and in essence, we did the same for the rest, because Richard was already in the ensemble, then you became the next ensemble member, then Greg and I went in basically at the same time, and then the girls came in after, but we like helped each other out to get there. It wasn't I'm in, I'm done.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's very similar to sports, like I was talking earlier. And that's why, to me, that I knew that route is like, it's like a sport. We got to help each other to succeed. If we don't play together as a team, we're not going to win. It's the same in improv. If you don't play together as a team, you're not going to have a successful show.
Yeah, it is crucial. It's one I quote this often, but Dave Rosowski said in one of the workshops we took with him at some point that the only mistake you can make in improv is casting.
Yeah.
Because that group of people that you're doing it with, that's important that you share a language of some kind on stage and with each other so that you can pick up what other people are putting down.
Yeah. I think one of the other things that we did well as Offsides was we took workshops together.
Yeah.
So we would sign up for external workshops, when we went to festivals and stuff together. And then also if all of us couldn't go and one or two of us would take a workshop, the next Monday when we met, then those two people or one person would talk about the workshop. Hey, this is what I learned.
Yeah.
We would try to help each other out in that sense.
What are you doing now, or how do you continue to grow as an improviser?
I feel teaching has drastically helped me as an improviser because as a performer, then your brain is automatically being the teacher also in there. Does that make sense? Like when you're in a scene, you're editing yourself at that fast speed of notes that you give your students in class, and you're like, remember this obviously this is happening in a flash in the scene, but for us as you teach and you continuously give these specific notes, it's like, know that character, have some background with each other, have a want for your character. You're processing this as a performer then, so it helps you out also. And then I go back and read all the old books I read when I started improv, and it's amazing how now you learn something different from a book you read like maybe 20 years ago, and then you're like, oh wow, back then I didn't know what this meant, but now I'm like, oh yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, or even it means something different to you now than it did then.
Correct. And I still take workshops. I'm a firm believer. I'm like, just because I've been doing improv 22 years and teaching for, when I started 2009, so 16 years, it doesn't matter. I love signing up and taking workshops from other people and learning from my peers.
Yeah, it's great to get a new perspective on things. I know that Gen S and Lab Rats aren't around when they do the showcase for each class, because that's a thing that's new since I was there, is each class now has a showcase, right?
Correct.
Now, do they pair seasoned players with the students for those, or is it just students?
Just the students. And like, for example, I teach level 3, which is my favorite class to teach. And Richard also teaches level 3. So we always do our classes together. So both of our classes do a showcase together.
And then you two are the hosts?
Correct.
Okay.
And then what we changed originally, because like you said, originally it was only level 4 that did a showcase.
Right.
Then it was level 4 and 1 for the longest time. And then the students were asking for it. So eventually we did level 2, and now level 3 also does it. But the way it had originally been done is like, if you and I are teaching a class, your class does the first half, and my class would do the second half.
Right.
Well, after Richard and I did the first session of level 3 ones, we realized that your students and guests, a lot of them would leave at intermission. So I told Richard, I'm like, what if we do it this way? What if we have all the students sit in the first couple rows and we do one scene from each class? And he's like, let's try it. And we did it. And now most of the performers have taken that on now, as we do one scene from your class, one scene from my class, one scene from your class, one scene from my class, and so on. So that our guests don't leave, and everybody gets to see the whole show.
So the next goal that I'm going to give you, I'm just going to arbitrarily give you, is to intermesh them a little bit more. Because by level 3, chances are those people have had classes together, right?
Yes and no. Because, I mean, if you remember when we were going through classes, like, classes tend to stay together. There might be, like, 1 or 2 or 3 that are from another class, but most of the time they kind of stay together. And I know what you're saying, like to mix them up, but also at level 3, I want you to remember a lot of them are still pretty green.
Yeah.
So they're still some are like detrimentally nervous by the show, and we really got to talk them down and be like, don't worry, it's going to be fun, and we're there to support you. But we have done that, to say it. We have done some scenes where we mix them, but yeah, I'd love to do that too.
Yeah, you don't want that extra little layer of
a fear for them.
Right.
No. Yeah.
That's awesome. I was asking because I was going to say that I not only teaching, but I feel like performing with people that would be not quite up to your level is also beneficial, because you really have to lean on the fundamentals like you don't if you're in a show when you're playing with someone who's better or on the same level as you. And it really just kind of refreshes all of that and can be a great learning experience for everybody.
Correct. And I'm the same way. Like, if I get invited and I'm available, I'll do a show with whoever. Like, it doesn't matter to me. I'm not highbrow where it's like, oh no, I only do shows at SAK. No, if If you invite me and I'm available, I'll do a show.
Yeah. I think it's great for everybody in shows like that. I've mentioned this in one of the other shows as well, but there was this guy in one of the classes at I.O., and when we were there to watch a different class. He was in one of the other classes, but it was fascinating because every night we just kept asking ourselves, is he a genius or is he just the luckiest person on the planet? Because he'd start and you'd be like, oh, that wasn't a great offer, and somehow he would make gold of it, and it was just one of those things where I think he was just leaning on the fundamentals, and he would just do the things that you're told to do. Sometimes,
Right.
That you end up thinking, oh, that's kind of cliche, or I don't really need to do that. And that's true in some level, but on the other side of that coin was, well, but that's what this guy's doing, and every time it's funny.
Yeah, and it's also great when we were saying to performing with students and stuff like that, to build a community also. 'Cause
Yes.
that's one thing about at least Orlando. It's like the improv community has really picked back up and is growing. There's a lot of indie teams. There's a lot of places for people to perform. Because when we were coming up, it was SAK or Comedy Warehouse. And
Yeah.
I mean, you had to be the top of the performers to be in those two stages. So that was it. Maybe 6 degrees, but also you had to be invited to be in that from that group. So that was it. Now
Yeah.
there's the Corner Gallery does shows. There's a group that does shows here in DeBerry, closer to where I live. There's a group that does shows at the Sanford Theater. There's a theater in the Oviedo Mall. I don't know if you remember the Oviedo Mall, but one company took one of the spaces inside the mall, because malls are now obsolete, as you know, and they turned it into like a little theater. And so there's a group that does shows in there. So there's actual spaces for you to do shows on top of a lot of indie groups.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
There's so much talent in Orlando. I'm glad that more of it's getting on stage. I want to shift gears a little bit now and go through my Proust questionnaire with you, my Inside the Actor Studio type questions. And we can spend as much or as little time on each one as you want.
Sure.
No rules. These are just, I like to think maybe they're a little bit deeper. They can be, but they don't have to be. So we'll see. And some of them are just fun, I think. So first one, Jose, how do you get into the proper headspace to play?
For me, the main thing is connecting with the performers. So just talking, how's your day going? I think now as I have grown as an improviser, I don't need as much warm up as I needed when I was starting, where it was like, oh, we need to warm up or we're not going to do a good set on stage. It's more of the connection. I want to know if I haven't seen you in a while, how's your day going? How's the family? We start telling stories, just getting the chemistry juices flowing so that when we're on stage, it's already there.
Yeah. Do you think that when we were just coming up, especially when we were just apprentices or in Lab Rats, Gen S or whatever, that warm up, do you think that was burning some of the nervous energy out as well to be that active, or is there a place still for that?
I think so. I think as we get older, we're also like, I don't want to spend energy that I'm going to need for the stage. Because, my favorite warm-ups at SAK were Run Dog. Do you remember Run Dog?
Yes.
For those listening that might not know what Run Dog, I want to say Greg started it, but then it started evolving on its own. It was like a snowball.
Yes.
But originally it was just, we were playing hacky sack, and Greg introduced a bucket in the middle of the hacky sack game. And he was like, we have to hit it 3 times. And then after we hit it 3 times, it is bucket eligible. And then we can get it into the bucket. If we successfully get it into the bucket, then we nyuk nyuk, making a nyuk 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 sound like we're penguins around the bucket.
Yes.
So that was the original game. And then we started adding rules. If we successfully did 3 bucket eligibles where we got them in a row, then we would nyuk nyuk through the door. Do you remember this?
Yes.
Through the door where the host is setting up the game, and out the other door to where the audience was going to go, what is happening?
Yes.
And then we kept adding rules, and it was in the unlikely event that you hit it in the bucket before it is bucket eligible, you got chastised and yelled at and excommunicated from the game.
Yes.
Do you remember that?
Yes.
So that kind of stuff was fun. And we were so young back then. We're in our 20s, in our early 30s, even through our early 30s. You have so much energy that you're like, yeah, let's do warm-ups, let's do this. Now I feel like, let's just sit down and talk. Because if I do a lot of these bucket eligibles and yuck yucks, you're going to have a very sedentary Jose on stage then, because that's all the energy I had.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Do you think it has affected the energy on stage at all?
No, I don't think so. Because last night we had a lot of energy and our warm-up was literally just us talking how's everything going? How's everybody doing?
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
I think mood can affect energy on stage a lot more than we ever gave it credit for back when we were running around the market.
That's why I feel, and this is something that's newer. I don't know who brought it. I can't remember who brought it to SAK, but I even use it in class now, is checking in.
Yeah.
And I think that's priceless. I wish we had known about that when we started Offsides. I guess we did check in. We just didn't know we were checking in because we were talking to each other.
Yeah.
But to really focus and call it a check-in, to say, hey, this is the mental space I'm in. This is what's going on. Don't tug on my right arm because it hurts. Things that we should know when we're on stage. And then the great thing about improv is you can do it with anybody. If you're checking in with somebody you've never performed and you're like, hey, I don't like playing blue. So if we could keep this show above the belt, that's something that's great information.
Yeah.
I don't like my face being touched. That's information you should tell me, because in the scene I need to remember, you don't want to be slapped or you don't want to be touched in your face.
Yeah, Mike should have told me that before the pre-scene.
I don't like getting punched in the nose.
Right. I mean, problem solved.
Yeah.
What is your favorite get for?
Oh, this comes from you. So I remember watching you doing get fors and being like, Steven is so creative. Like, he takes you down this path and then there's a left turn you don't see coming. And that's that's what he's getting. And I was like, that's so brilliant. Do you remember a lot of the get fors that you would do? Like, you would take the audience through this trip. You're going in one direction, you're telling them a story, and then all of a sudden you take a hard left.
Yeah.
and I was like, that's brilliant. So one of the ones I've started and I really love is, so I don't know if you know, but I've been working on losing weight. So I've been walking a lot. Started with walking, but then I started doing 5Ks. And then from 5Ks, I ran my first marathon. And I pause, and the audience usually goes nuts. Like, and I'm like, it was hard. Keep talking to them. And then from there, once it dies down a little bit, I'm like, so what's the last thing you lied about? And it obviously erupts. Now, I get a kick out of it, but obviously that setup needs the timing for it to work. And one of my students, bless his heart, at his showcase, he's also a bigger guy. He tried to do the same get for.
Yeah.
Except he must have memorized it from watching me do it.
Yeah.
And he had no pauses.
No.
So he basically was like, so I've been trying to lose weight. I started walking. I did a 5K and I ran my first marathon. What's the last thing you lied about? And so it was like, you just needed that pause. I'm like, it would have been perfect. And it was, to me, it like tugged at my heartstrings, because to copy somebody it shows the respect you have for them, and the love, to me, is your admiration towards them. So I was like, I loved it. Watching one of my students do my get for, I loving it. But then at the same time, I was like, I wanted to help him. I'm like, you didn't completely do it correctly. You missed the pauses. And I told him afterwards, and he's like, oh, okay. And then I saw him do it in level 4, and he didn't do the pauses.
Chuck it up to nerves.
Yeah, but that's my staple. That's the one that I'll do right now. I usually throw it once in every show, and it usually gets a good laugh. But that started from you, listening at all yours, that you were like, oh, yes, I got to tell like a little story and then catch them off guard.
Yeah, I do enjoy doing that, and a lot of them are just kind of based on something that I've seen or experienced in the day. The thing I love about yours is that it doesn't lead to scenes about marathons.
No.
Because I had one that I used to do that involved Walmart, but every scene would be in a Walmart. I was like, no, that was part of my get. That wasn't the suggestion, so I just stopped using it. But I think the most recent one of those kind of things that I did was the last time it snowed. It's not this time, but the last time it snowed was kind of before a show, and I said, so driving here today, I passed a house, and there's a couple of kids out, and they were making the snowman out in the snow. What's something that makes you want to throw up?
I love it.
Yeah, I do like to do that.
Yeah.
So kind of dovetailing into that, what is your least favorite suggestion?
Let's rewind.
Yeah.
What is my least favorite get for?
Okay.
Ask me that one.
Okay, what is your least favorite get for?
When people ask, what is in a box? What is in this box? Or, what am I holding in my hand?
Yeah.
I'm like, come on, be a little more creative. Like, what's in this box? No, like, come on, do a story, do something.
Yeah.
Ask for something.
I think the reason that you get a response, they're going to be very similar responses each time because you're not guiding them to anywhere. But if you trigger their imagination a little bit ahead of time and they can laugh at the thing that you just said, they know that there's all the pressure's off, so they can yell out anything because they're probably going to get a laugh then too.
Correct.
About something they've lied about. And it opens the door for anything. And so you're triggering their brain to get to a place where they're able to yell something out. But when you just say, what's in a box this big, it's if they think of something immediately, they're probably ashamed and aren't going to shout it out.
Right. Or it's shoes or my baseball cards. I mean, unless you burn those, that's all you're going to get.
Yeah. It's too wide open.
Yeah.
So then of the suggestions you get, what is your least favorite? And it could be something that's happening now because for a while it was Charlie Sheen and a while it was Shake Weight, and those I know have long since passed. But so it could be something that's just happening right now that's super topical. But is there a suggestion that you just don't enjoy?
Your typical bathroom, it's like be creative, or the person that yells out something not PG when we're in a PG show. It's like, okay, dildo. It's like, okay. So those, it's just, when the people are trying to be funny, those are usually the suggestions are like, all right.
And I think you nailed it because that's what they're trying to do. They're not trying to help you, or they're not trying to give you something that's going to help you do a good scene. They're trying to be funny.
They're trying to show the people that they're with that they're funny and they should be on stage too.
Right. Yeah. Do you think, what if in that moment they'd be like, oh, come on up here. You're brilliant. Come on up here and do this next scene with us.
You're in the scene with us.
Yeah.
Like, what? That's what I'm going to do next time.
Laugh and then invite them to the stage.
Yeah.
Describe your onstage persona. How is onstage Jose different than everyday Jose?
Oh, I think I'm pretty similar because, growing up, like in school, like I said, I was never in theater. I think the only experience with theater that I had was in the first grade. We did a play, like a Christmas play, and nobody was brave enough. Somebody had to go through the curtain and say, we present to you first grade Christmas play. Nobody would do it, so I was chosen to do it. So that's my only experience with theater, was that in the first grade. After that, it was all sports. Yeah, so I would say that with that being said, growing up through school, I was always like the class clown, making fun of stuff, making fun of people. So I feel that that's still the person you see on stage, the Jose you see on stage.
Yeah.
If you hang out with Jose, the Jose on stage is usually the Jose you're hanging out with later on having a drink or whatever.
Yeah.
So it's the same. I am not ashamed or shy of making fun of my weight, or people that doesn't bother me. I know some people are, like, you can't mention it to them, some of the performers. If I play an animal on stage and Chris is in the show, his line at some point is going to be, what do you feed your cat? And he knows he can do that with me, but there's other performers he can't do that with.
Yeah.
And that's never bothered me. It's like, so I'm pretty happy-go-lucky with everything.
And how would you describe your relationship with the audience when you're on stage, if that makes sense? I can try to clarify.
Clarify it.
Sure. Yeah. So the sort of the archetype that I have in my brain is Jay.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Who is very, like, yelling at the audience and very, disruptive towards the audience. Usually.
Yes, but I feel like still liked by the audience.
Correct.
And he can get away with that. I couldn't. So what's the Jose relationship with the audience?
I feel mine is like the likable teddy bear.
Okay.
The big guy that they want to hug and hold on to, because I'll play around with the audience a lot, and a lot of that stuff I took from Jay that you were speaking of now, and some I just learned on my own. But it's like, calling out the audience because you bring them into the show.
Yes.
Like if they make fun of something, or when we play the Duel of Fools, which is basically kind of like comedy sports where they're giving us scores and they give us a low score. It's like, go out and have that moment where, like, you're going to attack them, but that only works if your team knows and they grab you, and make it into a scene. And having that playfulness with the audience, I feel like I do that with the audience a lot.
Yeah. What inspires you on stage?
Ooh, my fellow performers. I love watching my fellow performers play. So I have to remind myself a lot of times, you're in the show too. So you have to be paying attention, because a lot of times I'll catch myself enjoying, especially when it's the other team playing at the moment, if it's the duel, I'll catch myself enjoying the scene, like just being amazed at what my fellow performers are doing.
Yeah.
And I have to remind myself, pay attention, because any moment you might need to be the bear, and
right.
you don't want Chris to yell at you.
Yeah. Exactly. What shuts you down or takes you out of it when you're on stage?
Another performer belittling another performer. And what I mean by that is using the other performer as the joke when you know they don't like that.
Yeah.
Right? So like what I talked about earlier, that it doesn't bother me if you talk about my weight or use that. But if you know another performer doesn't like that and you're doing it to get the laugh, then in turn you're hurting your fellow performer.
Yeah.
So those are the kind of things that'll irritate me. Those are the kind of things that'll get you a note when we get to the green room from me. It's like, you can be smarter than that. And the note would be that it's like, play at a higher level. You're smarter than that. You don't need to belittle your fellow improviser to get a laugh.
Yeah. And if we want the laugh, then we should make ourselves the butt of the joke.
Correct.
That's the classier and the harder thing to do versus making someone else the butt of a joke. That's very high school jock.
Correct. Bully. That's
yes.
very bullyish. Yes. And unless you've been given the green light. I always give the green light when it comes to stuff like that with me. But if you don't have it from the other person, then don't do it.
Yeah.
Also, so when a performer upstages another performer, also for the accolades or the laugh.
Yeah.
That also rubs me the wrong way. Or when you don't protect the audience. That one too. We've had instances, I remember, where an audience member will come up, and if an audience member is on stage, our job is to protect them and make them look good. Just like our job is to make our fellow performers look good. That's our main focus now, is that audience member we just brought up. Well, it's happened where we bring him up, the audience might do something and they're successful, and this actually happened. And then on the way down, the performer upstages them by doing what they did, but better.
Yeah.
Why did you do that? I'm like, just let them have their shine for those 1 to 2 minutes. I'm like, we know you can do it. Let them have their glory.
Yeah, for sure. It's their moment. let them have it. Yeah, I agree. Is there a moment of improv or a show that you'd relive if given the chance? I mean, just relive it as it was.
I don't want to sound corny, but any show we did with Greg,
yeah,
I would relive in a moment.
Yeah.
Anything. I mean, it was such a joy to play with. For those of you that don't know, I'm talking about Greg Yates, our other founding member of Offsides, who passed away. And he was just such a giving person on and off stage, but on stage. And it was so fun to play with him. So, yeah.
Yeah, he was one of those people that would, and I think this just made our improv better as a whole, but because as well as we knew him, he was also constantly surprising you on stage. And,
correct.
And that kind of being off kilter or off balance a little bit, I think leads to really great improv, because you can't plan ahead when you're constantly being surprised.
Correct.
Is there a choice in any show that you'd go back and change? Anything that's stuck with you this long, or maybe it was even last week?
Maybe not eating a burrito before the show.
But then we wouldn't have that story or that memory.
That's true.
Things like that I do wonder, is like, does that person who was up there for the moving bodies, did they have a version of that story that they still tell? Who knows?
And it's completely different. He goes, man, they brought me on stage and this boy just shit his pants on stage. Can you believe that?
That's why I went into plumbing.
I feel that's why I love improv. It's just because you're living the moment.
Yeah.
So, and life itself already is so hard and always throwing you curveballs. So it's like, to be able to make fun of mistakes or things that are happening in the moment on stage is just great. That's what I love. I know they say you're not supposed to use improv as therapy, but to me, and I say this every time I go to a SAK show, I'm like, showing up to the SAK show is like, it's where I get to release and just have fun. And because, work is stressful, life is stressful, things that are going on, but then I get to have fun on stage for those 3 hours, 2 shows. It's like, we just have fun, and I forgot about all the other stuff that might be stressing me out.
Yeah. I mean, those same people would probably say tennis shouldn't be therapy, but I mean, some people, not to stretch the sports comparison too far, but some people play basketball to relieve stress, or play a sport to relieve stress, or go biking, or whatever it is, which isn't to say that it's therapy as much as it's therapeutic. So why not? I mean, I think we've done people that were very much, whether they knew it or not, were using improv as therapy. And I was torn about it at the time, but I'm like, how could I take that away from them? How could I ever take that away from them?
Correct. And actually, I disagree with that statement that people use of don't use improv as therapy, because Chris Dinger teaches a class, Improv for Anxiety.
Yeah.
And it's actually, I helped him with like one of the first couple of them he did. It's very therapeutic. Like the way he teaches the class, and for people who are anxious, I was like, wow, this is therapy. This is good.
Yeah.
I just sent you, and probably you won't, but I just sent you, so that sits in my office. I'm actually facing that. But that's one of my old students. I don't know if you remember him, Chris Travador. He was the tattoo artist right next to SAK.
Uh-huh.
Do you remember him?
No, I don't. He's Facebook friends with me, and I've seen him, and he looks familiar, but I can't remember the context.
So he was right next to SAK, is that stair that goes upstairs to that second floor.
Uh-huh.
And he was one of the tattoo artists there, and he became friends with Greg and myself, and he was our student. Well, when I started looking at art that I was going to put in my office, I'm like, instead of buying art, why don't I have people that I know and friends, and I'll commission art from them? So I asked them, and basically all I told them was, whatever you think of me or anything you feel inspires you, and do a art piece. And he did that one. So it's in my office.
That's amazing. I love it.
Which is pretty cool. It's a combination of the SAK walls and then Greg on me when we did that photo shoot. Oh my goodness. Do you remember that photo shoot? Not going on a tangent.
Yes.
Greg looked like an Oompa Loompa. Because they have to, what do they call it? Do the makeup like for the photo shoot.
Yeah.
I remember we were sitting, it was only him and I. Because everybody got different time slots, and for some reason him and I were the ones that went together. And nobody else. So we had the whole studio to ourselves. You can imagine how much fun that was. But they started airbrushing us. And I look over at Greg and I just started dying laughing. And he goes, "What's wrong?" I was like, "You look orange." And sure enough, like all his pictures, he wasn't able to use almost any of them because he looked like a little Oompa Loompa.
Yeah, it was a bizarre experience all the way around. I'm not going to name the company that did them, but it's someone that SAK had partnered with at one other time. And I feel like because there was some reticence, we were sort of chomping at the bit to have these photos done, because we're like, all the photos in the lobby are not of us, and there's kind of a new group in the ensemble, and all the photos out there are of people who've moved to different places. They're no longer even in Orlando. They've moved on. And we, why not do that again? You did it before. And there was some reticence there. And I think one of the reasons why is I feel like maybe the first experience was also strange, but that was never told to us. It was never explained, well, we could do that, but look, guys, that wasn't a great experience. The pictures didn't all end up being well. But anyway, somebody called somebody and got connected again. And, knowing what I know now and dealing with Photoshop like I do now with, I don't do portraits, but hobby that I do some photography here and there. Anything that was done in that makeup chair can now at least be done in Photoshop after the fact. Photoshop and Lightroom or whatever. You can do all of that now after the fact. So the fact that they were putting makeup on all of us like we were going to go on like a news broadcast or,
on set. Like we were going on set,
is kind of crazy to me. And so many people's pictures. Katie Hammond's photos did not look like Katie Hammond. They looked like someone else entirely. And a lot of them were just not great. And the hope was, I think, from the photographer that we would buy headshots from the photos that were taken for SAK.
Correct. Nothing of that nature happened.
Yeah, not. I think a couple people maybe were pleased enough that they used them, but not me. And there were a lot of people that were like, "Wow!" And it wasn't like they were just absolutely horrible; they were just strange.
Out of that photo shoot, what I am happy about, one, I got to do it with Greg, so I have that memory. But two, we do have a sequence shot of Greg and I, which sits in my office. I'll have to take a picture and send it to you. But it's the attack, support, and trust. And attack is a picture of Greg flying through the air, kicking me.
Yes.
And then support is a picture of Greg sitting on my shoulders. And then trust is a picture of Greg completely airborne.
Yes.
Looking at the camera and me with my hands out about to catch him.
Yeah.
So I'm happy that at least I ended up with that memory and those pictures out of that.
Yeah, I've seen those photos, and I always wondered if the one with him airborne was a composite or if that was in the moment, and it was in the moment.
You remember Greg. I mean, he would do anything. And I was like, what if you come running and jump in my arms? And he's like, okay. Well, the first one, he was like 10 feet in the air.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm like, oh my God. And I have to like look at the camera. So I'm like staring at the camera, but at the same time, I'm like, I hope he lands on my arms. It was a complete trust fall. He was trusting me that I was going to catch him.
Yeah. Well, that's why I wondered if it was a composite, because, having been in that studio space for my photos, like, how did Greg get that high?
Nope, he just came running and flew in the air. Same with the kick one. That was live also.
All right, getting back to these.
Where were we? What was the question?
The next one is, what advice would you give to your younger self?
Ooh, this is a good one. So I would give myself the same advice I give my students now. When you listen to a note, just say thank you and process it.
Yeah.
I think that's the biggest thing. If I could tell my younger self that, improv those first, 6 to 8 years would have been so easy. If instead of having an ego when somebody gave me a note that maybe I didn't think, because sometimes somebody will give you a note and like, who are you to give me a note? If I didn't have that and I would have just said thank you, that would have sped up my learning so much more.
Yeah. What is your favorite type of character to play?
One that my fellow performer doesn't expect me to play. So something that's really out of the box for what they're expecting me to do. Because, we all have what I call our back pocket characters.
Yeah.
Normally, if we're in a scene, what are some characters that out of the top of your head, you're like, Jose might play this, this, this?
Well, I immediately thought of the woman that you play.
Okay. Wait, the ethnic woman? Or
Yeah, I think so. I would say that's accurate.
Oh, that's the thing. There's now different women. So, like back pocket ones, I have my ethnic woman, but I also have the Southern Belle lady that sits there fanning herself.
Yeah. I think I've seen that one too. I don't know.
That one caught Joel Warren off guard. We were doing a chair scene, and he turns around, and I'm just like fanning myself, and he said something, and I was like, I've been waiting for my mint julep for 3 days. He just like started laughing for a little bit and had to compose himself before we continued the scene.
Yeah. And I feel like another thing that I've seen you play, I don't know if this is a fully defined character, but I feel like you are, and I think because this also goes against the grain of what someone would expect from you, is someone who's afraid of something.
Oh, yeah.
Because I don't think people normally look at you and think...
That's fun to play, too.
Yeah, I don't think people look at you and like, oh yeah, he's afraid of a lot of things. So then when you're like really afraid and you shriek at something, or that catches people off guard.
One that I got from you and Greg, actually, and I love doing now, is playing an inanimate object. Because I don't know if you remember, you and Greg did a scene one time, and you were both ornaments on a Christmas tree. Do you remember that one?
No.
Oh my goodness, that one is in my brain. So somehow it got endowed that, like, the scene started, nobody knew, and you guys were talking to each other, and you were stationary, and all of a sudden, Greg was an ornament. So then you realize that you are too. So the whole scene was just two Christmas tree ornaments talking about how they disliked themselves on an ornament and they didn't want to be there anymore and they wanted to travel the world. And I was like, that was such a creative choice. So I actually push my students to do choices like that, where it's like, really think out of the box. You don't have to be a person. You can be anything.
Yeah. I wish I remembered that more. If you could do a scene with anyone, who would it be?
I mean, going back to, because we miss him, it would be Greg. But if it's somebody that, because are you asking me somebody that I've never done a scene with?
No, not necessarily.
So let's break it into that. So if somebody that you've done a scene with and you would want to do it again and you haven't, to me it would be Greg. I really miss the guy, so it would be that. And you, because you're far away, you don't come down here enough. But like somebody that I've never done a scene with that I would love to do a scene with, it would be Ryan Stiles and Colin Mockery. Because I've already done scenes with Wayne Brady. So to be able to do a scene with Ryan Stiles, I think would be really fun, and Colin Mockery.
Yeah. I would love that. I was trying not to front load it too much, because the three parts of this question for me is, the first one is, if you could do a scene with anyone living, who would it be? So you've answered that. You've also answered this, but let's remove Greg. If you could do a scene with anyone who is no longer living, from any era, doesn't have to be current era, but is there anyone that you would like to do a scene with from the netherworld?
I don't know so much a scene, but just to be in the presence and learn from them, and I guess do a scene. Del Close. I mean, I would love to, having read the books and stories, I'd be like, that'd be interesting just to take a class from actually Del Close or do a scene with Del Close. What about you? Because you're hearing mine, but I'd like to hear yours. So reverse the interview. Anyone living, who would you want to do a scene with?
Well, I mean, I wrote a letter to Colin Mockery when I was in college and was like, hey, how do I get into this? What do you have any advice? And the only thing I got back in the mail was an autographed photo with my name spelled wrong.
That is priceless.
Yeah.
So no advice?
No,
advice?
Nothing. Just a photo, just a picture.
That's awesome.
And it may have been sent by his agent, you know, it may have been, who knows?
Right.
How that worked if he ever saw it. But I would love to do a scene with Colin. And then if I had to choose anyone, I would love to do, I don't know if he ever did it in life, but I would love to do a scene with Peter Sellers. That I think would be
Peter Sellers.
A lot of fun.
Oh, and outside of the improv world, Robin Williams. Like, I know he was a great improviser. So to do a scene with him, that would be like gravy.
Absolutely. The last part of the question then is, if you could do a scene with anyone fictional, who would you choose?
Ooh, fictional.
Yeah.
Deadpool.
I think that would be a fun scene, yes.
Yes, I would love to do a scene with Deadpool. I think that would be fun.
Yeah. I'd probably lean into Star Trek and just say Data. That would be, I think, fascinating.
That would be really interesting.
Okay, so getting back to our questions, what do you find is the most helpful from the booth?
Most helpful from the booth is technically any offer or any support. I mean, especially in SAK. I mean, I feel we're spoiled at SAK because we have such great techs at SAK that anything that they add to the scene is great. And I don't think people realize how much of an improviser those techs are when they are adding the mood lighting, the mood sounds maybe as a sound effect, or any little sound effect that, you know, maybe we're talking that we're outdoors and it's a gloomy day and all of a sudden you're hearing like light thunder and drizzle from the tech. It's like, that's amazing and I love it. Now, on the flip side of that,
that's the next question, yes.
Oh, okay, well, then I'll let you ask it. Go ahead.
Oh, sure. So before I get there, then, I just want to say I absolutely agree with you. I think that, especially having done improv other places now as well, the SAK tech is amazing thing to have, and those offers bring so much, even just music. If that was all it was music, those offers for intros and outros and stuff bring so much to the table, and they really elevate the show to another level. So yeah, the flip side of that is, what do you find least helpful from the booth?
So least helpful would be once the suggestion is given. Let's say the suggestion is jungle, all right? I get a get for, and the suggestion is jungle. To me, and I've given this note before, I'm like, let the performers give the first offer.
Yeah.
Because we might not be thinking we're going to start this scene in the jungle.
Right.
But if the tech gives us that soundbite or whatever it is, then we have to do it. And it's fine. I mean, you gave us an offer. Like I said, give us offers. But I always feel you want to give the people on stage the first go at it.
Yeah.
And go from there. Sometimes it's a home run. You know, what they give us is great. But other times it's like, that wasn't the route I was going to go.
Yeah.
You just made me go this way.
And you've been derailed, or
give and take.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's nothing you can do about it, but and those again are notes you can give, and it usually comes from a not so polished tech. It's like eager, you know, they want to be giving suggestions, and that's great. And I tell them, I'm like, there's nothing wrong with it. I'm like, these are things we talk about at post. I'm like, there's nothing wrong with it, but sometimes you want to give that beat to see what the performer has before you give your offer.
Yeah, by all means, cue it up. And then if we're in the jungle, hit it.
Of course.
Other than laughter, Jose, what audience sound do you revel in?
Oh, there's so many of them. When you get an aw, like you literally made them tug at their heartstrings.
Yeah.
That you get that, aw, I love that. And that's one thing I teach in class. I'm like, don't only really listen to your audience, but don't let it break you of character. I'm like, but anything that you get, you're getting through to them. It doesn't have to be a laughter. I remember I did a scene with Lawrence, and the people were like, the ladies in the front row were crying.
Yeah.
Because it was like I was breaking up with him, but it was like a long breakup and we were saying all these things and the person was crying. It's like you made them move in the scene, by what they were watching. So any reaction from the audience to me is a success. Even I remember one scene I did with Amanda, which afterwards I was like, I hope you know that that's not me. I played a very chauvinistic husband, I really pushed into it to where I was making her go, well, you belong in the kitchen and that's the only place you should be. And why are you wearing shoes? You got to be barefoot. Like I was like really hitting it hard to where they wanted to kill me.
Yeah.
And I loved it. I was like, I did my part. If you hated that character, then I did my part.
Yeah. Well, and I think that means if you can get reactions like that from the audience, you've played a character that was real for them. And
correct.
The huge line that I would draw between my experience seeing shows at Comedy Sports in Chicago versus what happens on the SAK stage is that there's this distance between the player and the characters, because it's always sort of really tongue-in-cheek and we're really sort of commenting, or the characters are never real. For the shows that I saw, there was never really a real character. It was all sort of characters, which can be funny, and they were shows that were funny for sure, but I feel like it's a better experience if you get the laughs and you get the ahs and you get the oohs and all the stuff in between, because if the characters are real, that's just a better audience experience, and the laughs are better.
Correct.
We've talked about this a little bit as well when we talked about post, but what is the best note that you've received?
The best note I received actually came from Eli, watching one of my shows at SAK, and he said, "You are better than the background." And I was like, what? I'm like, break that down for Jose English. What do you mean? And he was like, the last couple shows I saw you perform, and this wasn't just from that show. He goes, the last couple shows I've seen you perform, you have been the support. You, like, a scene starts and you support and you do this. He goes, and you're doing great. I want to see you command the scene. I want to see you take over the scene, like be the lead character. And it took me a while to understand what he was really saying to me, and it was just to start scenes. Don't be afraid to be specifically in scenes you're afraid to start. Like for me, it was Shakespeare stuff.
Yeah.
I really would sit back, and unless you called for the bear, I wasn't coming in. So I forced myself to, when it's something that I knew I was weaker in, I would start the scene because it forced me to play the entire scene, and I was probably going to be one of the main characters. So once I started doing that, it also opened me up to be more confident on stage.
Yeah. I'll ask this, but I think I might know what the answer is already. What is the least helpful note you've received, or the least helpful note that you could conceive of?
One that has no growth to it. Like one that doesn't really tell you. I'm trying to think of a specific one other than that analogy of basketball one. One that really doesn't guide you towards growth.
Yeah. Well, I think the basketball one works, and that's why I said maybe we've covered it, because I feel like the note that you got, you said it was from Eli?
Yeah, the one from Eli, yeah.
Yeah, is the opposite of that note.
Correct. It is.
And not only is the basketball note that you got, that some people are bench players, not only is that not really a note that helps you grow, but it might be a note that hinders you grow, so that you had to get that note from Eli and be like, get off the bench, Jose. You got to get off the bench.
Correct.
Versus being
100%.
told that that's where you belong.
Yes. You sit on the sidelines, okay?
Yeah. When we need a bear, we'll let you know.
Yeah.
If there were an Academy Awards for everything improv, what would you be nominated for?
And now for best smell on stage.
All right.
Somebody shit.
This might be the same answer. I don't know, but it's not what you will be, but what you would like to be. If you're remembered 100 years from now for something you did in improv, what would you want it to be?
I want it to be that he could play with anybody. You wanted to play with him because he was a joy to play with.
Yeah.
And that he supported you always on stage.
Yeah.
You knew he had your back. That would be the most things I want to be remembered.
Amazing.
And I feel that that's a lot of us as improvisers. We want that. We want people to want to play with us.
Yeah.
That's it for this interview with Jose Rodriguez.
You can catch Jose playing at SAK Comedy Lab in Orlando and playing with Offsides either there or around town. Follow him and follow Offsides on Facebook to keep current with their shows, and while you're there, follow Improv Autopsy. You should also check out Jose on the Eli Castro Show podcast, where he's often found on mic opposite Eli. If you're enjoying the show, leave a review wherever you're listening and help spread the word. If there is someone you think I should interview, let me know at improvbrain@gmail.com. As always, thanks for listening to Improv Autopsy.